Hunting around the world. From Alaska to Australia. From the Americas to Africa, Asia, and Europe. Sportsman on Film presents Hunting Bugling Elk with Jim Zumbo. Jim Zumbo is an expert elk hunter, author of Hunt Elk, and editor-at-large for Outdoor Life magazine. Join Jim as he departs Orofino, Idaho for the famed Selway Wilderness area. Dave Pettit is at the controls, and Ken Wilson, of Sportsman on Film, is Jim's hunting partner. Climbing out of the picturesque logging and farming town of Orofino, which is located alongside the Clearwater River, the scenery soon changes to the fog-shrouded wilderness that is the Selway, located in the panhandle of Idaho.
That's the spot. Boy, talk about curb service. You can pull up to the second tent.
Outfitter Ken Smith has his base camp alongside the only landing strip carved into the vast Selway.
How'd you like that little goosey doodle coming all right, boy, Alan? Great play, Dave. You did it again.
Once in a while we get it right.
Once in a while, huh? Well, I guess we can unpack and we'll see you in a week.
Sure.
Hopefully with a couple
Good enough.
All
Nice
right.
flying with you, Jim.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, see you in a week.
Made her back, huh? Hey, Kenny, how you doing? Good. By golly, it's been a while.
Sure has. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Ken, this is Ken Wilson.
Yeah,
Ken
I know
Smith,
you.
our outfitter. Well, you heard anything bugling yet?
Yeah, we have.
Have you?
Yeah, fellas went up a couple days ago and was setting up one of our spike camps. And when they was coming back in the evening, they seen some and they was bugling pretty good. So
Good, good. Oh, by the way, what kind of horse you got for me this year?
yeah, it's called Dynamite.
Ah, come on, Ken, don't do that to me again. He's not going to live up to his name, is he?
Well, certainly.
Oh, why can't I have a horse like Angel or Sweetie Pie or something like that? Always Dynamite.
Wouldn't be no fun.
Yeah, that's right. So we got about a 4-hour ride into camp to the same place where we were generally a couple years ago. Huh?
Yes. I moved that camp a mile down the canyon a couple years ago, or last fall, in fact. And it's about where the what you call the Forest of Terror
Forest
starts.
of Terror. Oh no.
Yes.
So it'll take us about 4 hours to ride in on
4 hours,
horseback.
yeah.
Huh? Penny, how many horses do you have in your total operation now between here and the hunting camp?
24.
24 horses. Huh? And how often do you have them shoed during the season?
Twice.
Twice. So you bring a horseshoer in to take care of all.
Yeah. Larry usually shoes the horses at the trailhead for us, and then but the semi brought him in a little late this time, and so he didn't get them all done down there. So I had to bring him in, but usually he shoes them at the trailhead, and for this time of year, and then I'll fly him back in around the 1st of November, and
Do them again. Huh?
do 'em
How far
again.
is the trailhead from here?
28 miles.
Which one of these crazy horses is mine, Kenny? Black one, I think. That's all Dynamite, huh?
Yeah, that's a Dynamite.
Old buddy, how you doing? Huh? You feel like hauling me around on these mountain trails for the next week? Huh? Yeah. There's a lot of good reasons why you should consider hiring an outfitter before you go elk hunting. Actually, there's 4 good points why you should. One of them is, of course, because the outfitter will get you into good elk country. Once you're in there, he'll help you find an elk. And once you get an elk, he'll haul the meat out for you. And of course, when you're in camp, he'll take care of all the comforts you need, such as food and shelter and a good place to sleep and whatnot. So lots of hunters don't hire outfitters, but in this backcountry area that we're in, you just about have to hire one or else have your own equipment. It takes a great deal of preparation and gear to do a hunt like this, and of course you need to know something about horses and have horses to do it. These horses are tied to what's called a high line. It's a rope stretched between several trees, and it's about 7 foot high. The reason for this is to prevent damage to the tree roots. If you tied the horse to the tree, he'd stomp around it and probably eat on the bark a little bit, and that's something you don't want to happen. You want to try to protect the environment as much as possible, especially in a camp like this where there's a great deal of use during hunting season. This is a base camp, and there are generally horses here for 2 or 3 months out of the year. So in order to minimize the damage and disturbance while they're tied high, well, we've got our riding horses all saddled up. Now it's time to get our gear all packed on the pack animals, and we're going to head out to camp. There's all kinds of ways to pack animals to bring gear into camp, and Kenny's using a technique called manning. What he's doing, he's going to individually wrap each item in a tarp, tie it up, load it on.
Most of the states use what they call panniers or chains and just cover tarps and diamond hitches. I like this method because it keeps your gear completely dry. And it's also kind of an art in itself. It takes a little longer than the panniard method, but it's more efficient, I believe. This is probably maybe the slowest method of transporting gear, but I like to use it because it keeps your gear completely dry. It's very important to have these loads manning fairly balanced in weight. When you get these tied on like that, then you check the rocking motion to see if it's balanced. Looks pretty good. Okay, and then you come to the back and you can kind of look at it, see if your loads are in proportion. Okay. About that time, huh?
Getting ready.
Getting excited.
Yeah. Well, that's good news that they're bugling. Now, maybe there's just these guys here that are bugling, but they're supposed to be good eating.
Oh, you bet. You can take all those spikes to see. I'll take the big boat.
That's nice of you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of your family. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll put a plate up on the wall instead of the antlers and say, mine was better eating. Anybody can shoot one of those big tough guys.
That's true. There's more target for those big guys. Easier to hit them. Before you put your rifle in the scabbard, make sure there's nothing in the chamber. Never ever ride on a horse with a chambered rifle. They're very dangerous. Whenever you move around your horse, do it slowly and gently and let him know you're around. Don't make any sudden moves, and talk to him, pat him on the fanny. because he could kick. You never know what might happen. Before you head out on the trail, while you're in camp, make sure that you have all the clothes that you want easily available, because the last thing the outfitter wants to do is have to unpack gear and ropes and whatnot on the trail and get out a jacket you might have forgotten or some rain gear. So I'm going to tie my raincoat here behind the horse, behind the saddle. I've already got rain pants on because the brush will probably be wet. Now if it was a balmy day, I'd probably tie a jacket on here because you never know. You're going to be riding 4 or 5 hours and it could get cold, it could start snowing, raining, anything in the high country. So make sure you've got the gear you want before you get into camp. And don't forget, in the West, when you're in elk country, the weather can be pretty fickle. So be prepared all the time.
That was a nice little walk you took me on there.
Okay.
I thought we'd get in about 3 in the afternoon and be able to read some magazines.
Or elk hunting, I guess. We got in too late last night for me to show you what I bring into elk camp, but I'll go through some of the gear now and tell you what I feel is essential. First of all, when you're going hunting elk, you're probably going to be in the backcountry with horses. And if so, most outfitters, or if you do your own private trip, you'll soon learn that you're going to want to keep your equipment down to a minimum. Lots of outfitters don't want any more than 50 or 60 pounds of gear because they've got to pack it a long ways on their horse, and there's special considerations for space when you're going into camp. So let's go through this briefly. This is my duffel bag. It's got lots of pockets in it. Probably weighs about 35 or 40 pounds. A lot of people tend to overpack when you're going on a hunting trip. And I've been on enough trips where I've gotten my gear down to a minimum and still be comfortable when I'm hunting. First thing out is a pair of comfortable moccasins you can wear and lounge around the tent, because likely you'll have wet boots and you won't want to be wearing those around. If you're in rainy country, wear wool. Wool can't be beat. It's absolutely the best garment you can possibly use. Wool wicks, and it's actually warm when it's wet. Other types of clothing will get wet and keep you wet and cold, and one thing you don't want to do when you're hunting is be uncomfortable. So I like to wear lots of wool. I'm wearing a woolen shirt here. I've got another woolen jacket in my day pack that I'll show you in a minute. As far as changes of clothes, I've got a a couple pair of Levi's, which is basically what I wear when I'm hunting. And I've got a sweatshirt to wear around camp, or actually when I'm hunting also. My grunt tube, part of the equipment. Practically every western state requires hunter orange. We're hunting here in Idaho. Idaho is the only northern Rocky Mountain state that does not require hunter orange. But every other state in the northern Rockies do. That includes the big states like Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Utah. So here's my hunter orange vest. Notice that it's loose and made out of some kind of cotton material. It doesn't make noise when you scratch it. It's interesting, a lot of hunters will spend a lot of money on an elk hunt or any hunt, thousands of dollars, and they'll go into a store as an afterthought and buy a 99-cent nylon vest. And the thing will rip and makes a lot of noise in the brush, and that's a factor. This vest here probably didn't cost me $5, but it's comfortable. In fact, it's warm, so give some consideration to your hunter orange clothing. Okay, we've also got sleeping bag. Now I have always liked to use down. Down is probably the best filler you can find in sleeping bags, but when it's wet, it's worthless. It doesn't dry well, and it's cold and clammy. There's lots of other sleeping bags on the market made out of various products such as hollow fill, fiber fill, Santique, and whatever, which are superior to down when wet. But nonetheless, now on this hunt, I knew I was going to be with an outfitter in a heated tent with a stove in it, so if the down bag did get wet, I could dry it. But when you're in a tent with an outfitter, usually down is okay because you're not going to get wet. If you're spike camped, don't use down because you won't have the option of drying it and your tent might leak. Use one of the artificial fills. Also in the bag in this compartment I've got underwear and whatnot, long johns. There's 5 or 6, 7 changes of underwear. This compartment has socks. I like to wear cotton socks with woolen socks over them. I've got about 6 or 7 pair of those. This pocket I have all my toilet articles, toothbrush, whatnot. Bunch of extra shirts. There's 5 or 6 shirts in here. A towel. Make sure you bring a towel to camp. This isn't Motel Hyatt Regency or whatever. You're going to have your own personal stuff. And basically some other underwear, long johns, and 5 or 6 shirts in here. So that's basically all you need in camp. Let's look at my day pack now and what I carry in this. This pack provides supplies that I will use during the day if the weather is bad, or just equipment that I might need, or survival gear. If I get turned around or something happens, the outfitter and I, or guide, whatever, might have to spend the night in the woods, or if I'm hunting by myself, we might have to spend the night out, and what you have on your back is what you have, so you have to make do with it. I like to carry the day pack on the horse over the saddle horn when I'm going into a trip, and when I get off the horse to hunt, I'll put it on my back. Obviously, I don't want it on the horse, so I can have it when it's available. This is some trail food that I make up myself. It's just peanuts and sunflower seeds and dried bananas and raisins and dried grapes and whatever you can. It's kind of fun to make up your own stuff. You can go to any supermarket and buy it and make it up. It'll keep you going if you have to spend the night out. Also got some candy bars for quick energy. Some of these are granola bars, which are what most hunters are using these days. Got all kinds of flavors. And my camera. I always carry my camera when I'm hunting to record whatever. Waterproof matches. Now there are some waterproof matches made that are not in waterproof containers. You can strike those things even after they've been in a glass of water for hours in the light. They're also windproof, but these are nice to have. Don't ever go anywhere without waterproof matches because they're really important. I have a skinning knife that I'll use when and if I get my elk, and hopefully it's when I get my elk. Got a little hand axe that's very handy. One of the handiest things for it is to quarter an elk. I don't know if you've ever tried to quarter one with just a knife. It's almost impossible. You either have to have a saw or an axe, and this does the job nicely. Only it probably doesn't weigh a pound. I talked about wool before. Here's a very heavy woolen jacket that I carry. This is what I'll use when I get back to my horse, and I might be cold after hiking around. It's got pockets in it to put other gear or whatnot. I normally wear my cowboy hat when I'm hunting, but if it gets real cold, I've got this cap I can put over my ears. I don't wear it very much, but I do carry it. And if I have to spend the night out, I'll put this over my head and provide a little extra warmth. Shells. Now these are heavy, and it might not seem like it's a wise idea to carry more weight on your back, but I think they're essential. You not only might have to use them while you're hunting, but if you do get turned around, you've at least got extra cartridges here to try to signal for help or even use them in obtaining some kind of game. Flashlight. Always carry a flashlight. When you're elk hunting, you probably will be leaving camp before sunup and getting down after sundown. So most outfitters these days and experienced hunters are using these little disposable types. They're very hardy, and they're long lasting, and they cost less than $3. And in fact, I usually carry a couple of them. They're real good little light. In the back pocket, got a space blanket. If I have to spend the night out, at least I can lie on this thing. And if I'm sitting someplace where I just want to watch for elk and the ground is wet, rather than get your clothes wet, sit on the space blanket. More comfort. A few more waterproof matches. These are in a little Ziploc bag just in case I happen to need extra matches. I always like to carry more matches than I think I'll need. And a couple rolls of film for my camera. And that pretty much takes up what's in my day pack. Again, the gear in here is something that will get me through a night if I have to, or else it will help me to be a little bit more comfortable if the weather changes. When you're out elk hunting, anything can happen. The weather can often be fickle in the West, and it usually is. One of the most important parts of your elk hunting paraphernalia, if you're out during the bugling season, is of course your elk calling equipment. Now I happen to have along with me a variety of grunt tubes and calls that I'd like to go through, so let me show you what kinds of stuff I've got here. Elk bugling has come a long ways in the last dozen years or so. Back 10 or 15 years ago, most people who used elk calls used simply a straight pipe, which could be made out of garden hose or a piece of conduit or something like this. Now this was a very popular bugle call a dozen years ago, and it's still being used. Let me give you a demonstration of it. Now that sounds kind of tinny and shrill, and compared to the bugles used today, it is, but it calls elk. This call has been in my backpack for probably 8 years, and I've called in dozens of elk with it, and it's been responsible for about 5 elk that I've taken. The important point is, when you're bugling, is not that you necessarily have to exactly imitate the elk, but to give some kind of a reasonable call and know what the bull is doing, how he's reacting, and how you should react accordingly. Let's talk about some of the calls that are on the market today. These are all grunt tubes, and they all have different kinds of mouthpieces. This particular tube has a reed inside. You simply hold it here. Pretty easy to use, no mouthpiece or anything. If you want to, you can take this off and use this as a grunt tube with a diaphragm. Another type of call with a different sort of a mouthpiece is this one here. Again, it's easy to use. Everything's on the outside. It's got a little protective cylinder here to put over the call, protect it. This call is the type that has an exposed reed, as you can see. Simply put this against the bottom part of your mouth, against your teeth. Hold this down with your tongue. Blow into it. Here we have another type of a grunt tube that we use with a call that we set inside. This comes out, and this tube can be used with the diaphragm as well as a standard grunt tube. This is the diaphragm call. This diaphragm call is simply a turkey call that's been developed 10-15 years ago. About the late 1970s and early 80s, folks have discovered that this can be equally effective as an elk call. One of the problems with the diaphragm call is the fact that it takes a while to learn how to use it. You have to put it inside your mouth and use your tongue just right and make sure it fits in order to use it correctly. There's about 8 or 10 manufacturers making these. All of them are a little bit different. Some of them have a couple of different latex reeds, some of them are a little bit larger than others, but basically they're the same horseshoe shape. In order to use these calls, take the call, now, you can use this call without the grunt tube. The nice thing about it is your hands are free if you're bugling an elk. Your rifle is here. It's in your mouth. You use it with the grunt tube, you get more resonance, it's hoarser, and there's a bit more volume. Let's try it. You can also direct the sound of this by using your grunt tube. Sometimes if you're working a bull in front of you and you don't want him to, you don't want to sound like you're where you are but want to redirect your voice, that throws the sound out behind you and makes the bull think that you're where you're not, which is sometimes very important when you're hunting. At the end of each bugle call, I let go with 3 or 4 grunts or whines. Sometimes an elk won't always bugle and grunt. Sometimes he will. Sometimes he'll just grunt. Sometimes he'll just bugle. Now and then you'll want to just try the grunting without the bugle. By the bugle I mean the long, drawn-out tones. Now, so far we've talked about bulls bugling. All elk are vocal. It's important to know that cows make noise, and that is kind of a breakthrough these days. Lots of folks have realized that before, but none have really applied that to elk hunting. Let me show you what a cow call sounds like and how easy it is to do. First I'll do it with the diaphragm call. Let's try another call that's made for cow calling. It's completely different than the diaphragm call, and it's a lot easier to use. It's an external call. Put it in your mouth, you bite on the end of it. It sounds just like a cow. Now it's pretty obvious to use some logic and understand why a bull elk will come to a cow call. Some elk have been whipped off by other bulls. There's no way they want to pick a fight with another elk. Some elk are herd bulls, and that means they've got cows with them, and they're not going to go off looking for another fight with a bull. But if you sound like a cow, that might turn the trick. That might call them in. Now I know lots of folks who are putting the bugles away and just using the cow call and it's working, but I wouldn't advise that. I'd use both. If you can use a diaphragm call, you're in good shape, because that probably accounts for the best quality in elk calling. But some folks can't use it. You might want to try the cow call, the external type call, or some of these grunt tubes that I've demonstrated where you simply blow into it without the diaphragm. A lot of people who are experts in hunting elk don't necessarily use the newest calls on the market. Lots of them like to use traditional calls that they've had for years, and a lot of those calls have notches on them from bulls they've called up. Ken Smith, our outfitter here in Idaho, has got such a call. Ken, come on over and show us your call and do a little demonstration. Let's talk about it a little bit. How old is that call?
I bought this call when I was 16 years old.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I bet it's called a lot of bulls there, huh?
Well, it's got 23 notches on it.
Oh my gosh.
Got different clients. Bugles from my guiding days.
How about a demonstration?
The biggest reason that I believe in it is because of the volume of it. It has a very high shrill pitch whistle, and it carries a long way. And you get out here early in the morning in these canyons with sound effects, and that whistle will ring down through that canyon for a long ways, and them elk can hear it a long ways away.
Mm-hmm.
And I can get responses with this whistle that I've never been able to get from any other source of whistle. Now I use the grunt tubes when I get in close to them, but this is the one I use mostly to get the answers, to locate them with.
One of the major topics of discussion around any elk camp, around any bunch of elk hunters, is the elk rifle. Is there a perfect elk rifle? You can argue and argue until the cows come home, and probably no one will be right. But at any rate, we've got 3 examples of elk rifles here, and they range from the smallest extreme to the largest extreme. So the 243 here that Ken Smith shoots, here's my 30-06, and here's Ken Wilson's 375 H&H Magnum. Ken, how many elk have you killed with your 243?
That's a hard one to answer. I bought the gun in '73, and I've killed one a year since then.
It's amazing. Now, a lot of folks say that a 243 is far too light for elk, but obviously here you are using a 243 successfully. And didn't you tell me once that you've never lost an elk that you've shot with a 243?
That's right. If you put the bullet in the right place, they're not going anywhere. And I don't recommend that anybody use a 243 because when I pull the trigger on that rifle, I know it's going to do the job. And I don't take chances with it. A bigger rifle, you can take maybe a little better chance, shoot through the brush or something at an animal and stand a good chance of hitting him, where I have to place my shot.
This is a rifle I use for elk hunting. In fact, it's a rifle I use for all of my big game hunting unless it's dangerous game. This is Bertha. It's a Winchester Model 70 .364 featherweight in 30-06 caliber. I'm not suggesting that the 30-06 is the best caliber for elk, but all I know is it's worked for me over the years. I've taken 15 or 16 elk with Bertha. And it's kind of like anything else. Some people drive Fords, some drive Chevys. It's kind of what you like and what works for you. But I like the bolt action. It's the strongest action you can buy, and you can work it pretty quickly. The scope on this is an old Weaver K2. It's got a dot reticule on it. The scope came with the rifle when I bought it back in 1963, just before the new Model 70s came out. But Bertha's a lightweight, got a sling on it, and fits well. And importantly, I think most importantly, is I know how this gun shoots. If I've got an elk within 200 yards, he's in trouble, I like to think. Because I know exactly what it does. I've shot everything from prairie dogs to marmots to woodchucks, to elk, to black bears, moose, and taken about 150 head of game with the rifle. So I know what it can do, and I have confidence in it, and it's never let me down, so I'll keep using it as long as I can. Ken, tell us about this big guy.
Well, this is my Africa rifle, really. It's a 375 H&H Magnum. I have a Zeiss 1.5 to 6 scope on it. It's a Seiko with a fiberglass stock, and I like to try new rifles in new circumstances, and I think because of the fiberglass stock and because it does shoot a 300 grain bullet, and because it is probably the very biggest that you need for elk, I'd like to give it a try on our hunt.
If a person is afraid of a big rifle because of the recoil or the noise, you shouldn't shoot it. But obviously, you shoot this 375 H&H well. You've had it in Africa and have taken several head of big game with it, so you're comfortable and relaxed with it. So I think that's a good choice. Elk are big animals, and you may get a difficult shot. And I think a 375 would do real well in these thick woods. Let's look at the comparative sizes of these three cartridges. Here's Ken Smith's 243. It's a 100 grain Remington Core-Lock compared to my 30-06, also Remington Core-Lock in 165 grain. And we'll put them next to Ken Wilson's enormous 375 H&H Winchester Silver Tip in 300 grain. So you can see we are talking about extremes here. Okay, we've shown you these three calibers from one extreme to the other and one in between. The point is, it doesn't matter what the caliber is. The most important thing is shot placement. Now, if Ken Smith puts a bullet in an elk's heart, it's going to go down just as well as if Ken Wilson puts a 375 H&H bullet into that elk's heart. So, let me just end this by telling you an old saying an outfitter told me one time. He said, it don't matter what you're shooting as long as you can shoot it. Now, there's one other thing. Elk are big animals, and I would never suggest you use anything smaller than a 243. 243 is borderline, and it's best in the hands of someone who can use it, like Ken Smith. Otherwise, I would very strongly suggest a larger caliber for elk.
And Jim, I have one more closing comment also, and that is that I never thought I'd be able to say this, but my fiberglass stock is by far the best looking stock that we've got here.
Now, wait
Of these three stocks, this is the winner.
Every one of those scratches means something. I mean, after all, memories and nostalgia. What do you think, Ken?
Yeah, mine's been rolled on, drugged by a horse. See the notches and stuff in it from being kicked.
Every one of those brings back a little memory, doesn't it?
Yes.
Now Jim and Ken Smith are ready to depart on a typical day of elk hunting.
When you're looking for a position to bugle from, there's two things you need to remember. Number one, watch the wind. We're going to be bugling into this way. The wind's coming at us, so we're fine. Also, try to sit behind some brush or a tree that'll screen you if an elk does come in. Have your gun ready. Okay, Ken, let's see if we can muscle one up. We've been sitting here about 15 minutes since Ken made the first bugle. We haven't had a response. So Ken will bugle again. We'll wait a few more minutes. If still nothing happens, we'll take off and walk about a quarter mile down into the timber and try it again.
Pretty good over in there in November. This time of year it's really too open. Starting over in here, all the dark timber in here, and then your open country around it. This makes it a good spot. You got the dark timber going being high.
Is this the place you were telling me about when you're taking all those big bills?
Well, one of the spots, yeah. They can come out of there and then they feed out of here in the evening. Hopefully we can get some bugling out here.
Looks like a good spot to bugle from.
I'm gonna go over here. Shoot like no.
Looks like a good spot.
I'll use this one first, maybe try the other one.
Oh, this rain and wind blowing, I don't have a lot more volume. Dynamite needs sound, then you are a welcome sight for sore eyes and sore legs. How you doing, buddy? Yeah. How you doing? One of the most welcome sights you'll ever see in a hunting trip is walking up to your horse after you've hiked all day long. Is that right, buddy? Huh?
While Jim never heard a bugle, Ken Wilson was able to get downwind of a bull looking for cows.
He's only got 5 points on the left side.
going by 6x6.
That was to be the last chance he had on the entire hunt.
When we address elk hunting, we're really talking about 4 completely different seasons. They include the pre-bugle season, the bugle season, what I call the transition season, and the late season. The bugle season is what this video is all about. That's the time of the year when most hunters think about elk hunting, because it's a time when elk are very vocal, they're challenging each other, and you have the capability of calling an elk into you with a call. The prime time to hunt elk during the bugle season is between September 20th to about the 30th of September, although 5 or 10 days before and after each date are not out of bounds. One of the most important aspects of hunting elk with a bugle is knowing how to interpret a bull's answer when he responds and how to react. Some folks might lead you to believe that if you can make a perfect elk bugle, if you can sound just like an elk, that's all you don't have to do. That's not true. That's not even half of it. I know a lot of successful elk hunters who have called elk in with calls that don't even sound like most bulls do. These people know where to find elk and how to seek those elk out once they respond. Let's talk about the different kinds of bulls that you'll encounter when you're bugling elk. The first kind is a herd bull. He's the master, he's the one with the cows. Obviously, if you're dealing with an elk with cows, you've got a bull who may be reluctant to come in. He might be very defensive. He might not want to seek you out because you're the challenger. So you might have to do certain things differently, some defensive things, some aggressive things to entice that bull. For example, let's say you have a bull out there that you're working and you're pretty sure he's got a herd of cows. Now how can you tell? One of the ways to tell is he may stay right where he is and bugle back at you, or he might start moving off. Now, you may intimidate him to think that you're bigger than he is. If that's the case, he may start moving off with his cows. He'll actually start hooking those animals and moving them away from you. If that happens, you can do a couple things. You can be aggressive. You can move in quickly if the wind is right and get very close, get into his territory, make him mad, make him come out and seek you out. Another thing you can do is just the opposite. Run away from the bull, break some branches, bugle as you go, make him think that you've got him, that he's not afraid of you. Maybe then he'll come and try to run you out of the country the rest of the way. Another possibility is to sound like a cow. Again, use that cow call. Maybe that elk thinks that you're another lady out there that should be part of his harem. Maybe he won't come out to look you up if you're another challenging bull. But if you sound like a cow, he might come right in quickly. Try all these little techniques. Don't be afraid to use various methods. If the elk doesn't come in, a lot of hunters think that they've done something wrong. Automatically they figure, well, I've bugled too much, or I haven't bugled enough, or I haven't bugled right. That probably isn't the case unless the wind has changed. Even a real elk sometimes can't call a herd bull. So try those various techniques and just see what happens. The second bull that you'll encounter in the woods is the lone bull, who is also known as a satellite bull. He's a bull without cows. Maybe he's been whipped by other bulls, or at least he's been outbluffed or intimidated. Nonetheless, he's very active. He's running around the forest. He's looking to gather up cows. Whether he can find some stray cows or fight off another bull, this is exactly his objective. Now this bull can be the hottest bull in the woods because he's mad usually. He's looking for other cows, and oftentimes he will come straight in. But sometimes he won't. If you sound like a big old ornery bull, you might intimidate him. He might not want to get whipped again if he's been whipped before, so he'll stay back. Maybe he'll run around from ridge to ridge, or run around a basin and bugling as he goes. Maybe he'll just grunt. In that case, there are several tactics you can do. You can move in close to him as you did with a herd bull. Or you can start running off and sounding like a bull running away. Again, you can sound like a cow. And don't be afraid to use that cow call, because if that loner bull out there thinks you're a cow, it's logical what'll happen. If everything's right, he may just decide to come straight in and you've got him. So use those various techniques again for the satellite bull as you would for the herd bull. Don't just sit there and bugle, and if he bugles but won't come, think you've done something wrong. Try different things, and always watch the wind, because You can do everything right, but if the wind is wrong, you've blown it. There is no way to call in a bull if he smells it. The third bull you're going to encounter in the woods is the wishful thinker, I call him. He's usually the spike bull. He's sexually mature, but he really doesn't know what's going on. Now, about breeding time, the cows will often kick the spike bulls out of the herd, and if they don't, the bigger bulls will. So the spikes are kind of hanging around the herd, and they're very intimidated by the bigger bulls. Oftentimes, it's very possible to call in spikes with the cow call or with the regular bull call, as long as you don't sound big and nasty. Now that brings up another point. Some folks think that the hoarser and the deeper the bull's bugle is, the bigger the bull, and the shriller and the tinnier the voice is, the smaller the bull. That's often the case, but not always. I've been fooled a lot of times when I've been photographing elk and hunting elk. Sometimes I'd hear a big old raspy, deep-throated bull, see him come out of the timber, and he's a little old raghorn with 4 points. Other times I've heard a little shrill voice come out of the timber, and here I'm expecting a little 4-pointer, and out walks the king of the woods. So you never really know. But when you're dealing with the spike, or the small bull, very often you want to sound as meek as you can. Again, the cow elk call works. Because if a spike hears a cow, he might think it's his mama or his sister, or else a girlfriend, and he might come running in. Use that cow call a lot. It will really work. This is the third day of the hunt. What we've done this morning is ridden out of camp about 4 miles on horses. We rode our horses down this ridge, tied them on this saddle. We hiked down this steep side hill and down into this draw right at the bottom where the creek is. And we slowly hiked up here to where we're sitting now, where we can hear our bugle. We're bugling from here. On the way out, we'll go back down into that thick draw where the elk are bedded, back up to our horses, which is about 1.5 miles from here, and we'll ride back to camp, which is about 4 miles away. We're not going to head back to the horses and go through those thick bedding areas until elk are active and up on their feet, so that means we'll be here for another couple hours. And generally, a couple hours before sundown, they'll start getting active and start to bugle again, although during the peak of the rut, they'll bugle all day long, but we don't want to get in there now and stir things up until they start getting active, and hopefully we'll hear some bugling on the way out. Normally we're getting back to camp after dark, getting back to the horses just about dark, and trying to spend most of the day while we've got shooting light. Ken, did you ever have a hunter so tired that he didn't think he could make it out of here back to camp?
Yeah, I had one time that was wanting to quit on me pretty bad. It was getting dark and I was wanting to get out of there. And he was saying, I can't go anymore. And he said, what if I can't make it out of here? And I said, well, you better. And he said, well, why is that? And I said, well, because I said, I'm going to camp. And he said, well, what if I can't make it? I said, well, see that log line right over there? And he said, yeah. I said, well, if you really don't think you can make it, then go over there and lay across that log, would you? And he said, well, what do you want me to do that for? I said, well, if you can't make it, when you die and stiffen out over that log, you're a hell of a lot easier to pack that way. sugar curve.
What's the closest you ever bugled one in?
15 steps.
Yours or the Elks?
Mine.
And what happened?
They, well, believe it or not, the hunter missed him. Shot straight in the air. Yeah, he was, the bull stood behind this tree for a long time and wouldn't move. And we was sitting by this log, and I reached down and broke a little branch off that log, and when I broke that branch off, the bull just jumped out there. Just 1 second he was behind the tree, and the next thing he was right there. And scared the hunter so bad he just shot his gun straight in the air.
Well, Gary was the first one to get that 6 point, so what do we have for him for cake?
We got spice cake.
Okay, let's see it before we get the cake.
All right, okay.
You got to prove them to us. Ta-da!
I don't know if I can get through the door here.
All right.
Look at that. That's okay. By God, that's a beautiful book.
Beautiful.
Real
Yeah.
nice. I guess you can have a little cake on that for a celebration.
Look where he's been rooting in the ground with him.
He was a pretty tough old boy. Kind of.
Let's see. Let's count the point. Let's make sure you got 6 points there. We don't get the whole cake. Turn a little bit more. Let's take a look. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
All right.
Boy, that's beautiful.
Bull just bugled at us from somewhere up on this ridge. The wind is just right. It's coming straight at us. The only problem is there's not good visibility to get a look at him when he comes in. So I'm going to go up a little bit higher and find a good setup and make a bugle, and I won't bugle until I get there. Set up just about where we want to be. Got a great spot here. Got a tree behind me to break up my outline. Give him a bugle and see what happens. And get ready. Here he comes. I can see him moving through the trees. I can just see his legs on top of his antlers. I'm not going to bugle because I think he's going to head right out for that opening. Come on, Wolf. He's not moving a bit. We got him. Well, we got him. That's what we came here for. That's one of the nice things about bugling for elk. You can often call them in real close and have a pretty decent shot. This bull looks like he might be pretty old and on the downhill side. He's got 6 points. His surroils here are pretty small, but it's pretty hard to tell unless we look at his teeth. But I'll bet he's probably 7, 8 years old or older. His surroils aren't very big, but nonetheless he's got a nice big royal here. It looks like it's probably 16, 17 inches long, and there's a nice ivory tip. Elk get those from digging around in the dirt and just working over brush and polishing them up nice. Yeah, he's a nice wide rack. You betcha. Pretty good mass on those beams. When I determined that this was a lone bull, I stayed in one spot and I bugled very infrequently because I knew he was coming toward me. I saw him in the trees and he was about 90 yards away, and I saw that he was moving toward an opening. I didn't bugle at all because I didn't want to scare him away. At that point, if I'd have bugled, he might have been intimidated and run off because he might have been whipped before, or else he might have seen some movement, or he just might have not come out at all. So the best thing to do in that situation was, I think, what I did, and that was to remain quiet and let him keep on moving into the open. After I get done field dressing this bull, we're going to go into some different situations on reactions of elk coming into bugle calls. Herd bulls and solitary bulls react very differently, and we'll get into some of those specific techniques. If that bull had have acted differently, I would have reacted differently. Number one, if he'd have started moving away from me, I'd have become aggressive. If the wind was right, of course, I would move toward him and try to move into his territory and bugle once or twice and get him mad, see if he'd come back out after me. If that still didn't work, I'd continue to push him, again, as long as the wind was right, and see if I couldn't turn him by getting a bit closer. If that didn't work, I'd try a cow call. Don't forget, this bull was by himself, and he's looking for cows, and if he heard a cow off in the trees, he might have come running. Now, if the wind had changed, none of that would have worked. I would have immediately moved accordingly downwind and then tried it all over again. Remember, the wind can be your worst enemy when you're hunting elk, no matter whether they're close or a long distance off, because it's very easy for them to smell you. So always watch the wind no matter what you do. Sometimes a trick that works when nothing else will is to sound like a bull that's mad. Do that by grabbing a stick and raking a tree like this. Don't be afraid to make noise. Keep your gun ready, because he might come. This raking simulates a bull actually scraping a tree with his antlers. Lots of times they'll do that when they're intimidated or when they're mad or upset. The reason I'm raking now instead of bugling is because that bull was so close, a bugle might have scared him off, but he might very easily have reacted to the raking and come in thinking it was another bull trying to outbluff him or even ready to fight. Another thing you can do is grab a nearby branch or a bush and thrash it, shake it around. Elk will often do that. Instead of raking a tree, sometimes they'll just start working over a small bush and totally demolish it. So grab a hold of a branch or a sapling or whatever and shake it vigorously. Make a lot of noise. Make it sound like another bull is in there working it over. When you thrash a tree like that, obviously make sure you're downwind and try to stay out of sight as much as possible. Keep your gun ready. You never know when that elk will come in. Lots of hunters like to walk the ridge tops when they're hunting elk. That's a good idea, but one thing make sure you don't do, and that's be skyline like I am now. Every elk below you be able to see it. Instead, get some trees behind you. Get down low. Keep some landscape and some brush behind you at all times when you're on a ridge. Don't make the mistake that a lot of hunters do, and that is to hunt exclusively from ridge tops. What you should do from a ridge top, get up there early in the morning and listen. Try to locate an elk just by listening to him. Then, if you don't hear any, walk the ridges and give a few bugles. If you don't hear anything from down below, it doesn't mean any elk are not down there. It simply means that they're not willing to bugle at that time. Lots of times you need to move down into those deep holes and get those bulls worked up by being in their territory. Another common mistake is to bugle from trails, logging roads, or places that are frequented by humans. Don't kid yourself. Elk know exactly where people move. They know where that traffic is. Get as far away from those areas as possible when you do bugle to confuse the elk. Because if you bugle in a spot, chances are good that other people will bugle in the same place if it looks good. And that's apt to be true in places that have a lot of elk hunters. The best tip I can give you is to get away from the ridges, away from the trails, get down into those deep dark holes and bugle where the elk live. Sometimes they won't answer you unless you're right in close to them, and that's what you need to do. Don't simply go out in the morning, bugle, and if you hear nothing, assume there's no elk around. That's often not the case. They very well may be there, but you need to get up real close to them to get them working. Let's take a situation where you know you're working a herd bull. Let's say the bull is bugling over here, and you can either see or hear his cows down here. Instead of bugling at the bull, one technique you might try is to circle, keep the wind in your favor, and get down between him and his cows. If you can get between the bull and his cows, close to his cows and then bugle, watch out, because there's every chance in the world he'll come straight at you once you bugle. The wind is perfect in this case, and I've got the option of doing just about anything I want because the bull's out here, the wind is coming this way. Neither the bull nor the cows will wind me. So I have lots of freedom, provided there's good screening brush to let me make my moves.
Hunting bugling elk often involves a series of actions and reactions between the hunter and the elk. In the case of this hunt, Jim's elk bugled. Jim reacted by moving to a downwind location that provided both cover and a good field of view. Then he bugled back. Jim saw him and chose to wait for a shot rather than bugle back or rake a tree.
Here he comes.
And the opening for a shot presented itself. Please stay tuned for previews following credits.